Hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Tech School.
Thanks, Johanna. And Steven.
Awesome. Yeah. Hey, guys. Yeah, like Joanna said, welcome to another edition of Tech School. We got an exciting speaker today. We got Joanna coming back on for part two in her project management series. She's going to talk about how to build the perfect schedule. I know she's got a presentation plan and some examples, so I know we're all excited. If you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. The more interaction we get, the more reach these videos have. And so that like or that comment that you leave might just push this out to an entrepreneur or a startup that really needed to hear some of this information today. So be sure to do that if you can to help support the community. But I'll hand it over to Joanna.
Okay, I'm going to share a presentation. Let me flip it back to the first slide. All right, share. Can you all see the Fokcus logo? Perfect.
Yes.
Let me put it in presentation mode so it's big. How's that?
Sounds good.
Okay. So we sort of did a teaser saying like how to build the perfect schedule. And it's sort of it's a trick, right? There is no perfect schedule. You can never know ahead of time exactly how your project's going to unfold or what's going to happen. You might have a pandemic in the middle of your project, and things won't go as planned, or people may leave your organization or join your organization that you never expected. And technology can change. So there are a lot of things that can happen to your project that. Can you all still hear me? I got a notification that I was disconnected.
Oh no, we can still hear you, Joanna.
Okay, good. So there are things that can happen to your project that there are things that you can't anticipate. You could sort of say like some unknown thing could happen, but you won't know what it's going to be. So the perfect schedule sort of has some elements, which has input from the people doing the work. You cannot build a schedule without input from the people who are actually going to do the work. If you're the only one doing the work, you can do that because you have input from yourself. But if you're working with a team, even if you're working with a vendor, or if you're working with an advisor or somebody who's helping you and providing, critical elements of what you're doing, you need to have input from those people. They need to buy into your plan. It doesn't have to be super detailed. It doesn't have to take a long time, but you do absolutely have to have input from the people that are participating. People really don't like it when you show up and say, here's the plan and here's your due date, and they're like, I can't do that, or where did this come from? Nobody asked me. That alienates people. Another thing that you need to think about, sort of, because you're the leaders and you're probably the not just the CEO, but the project manager too, is what done means. So when you ask people for input, they might tell you how long it's going to take them to do their portion of a task, and they might tell you when it's done that it's done, but it won't actually be done. Because usually when people give you this information, they're thinking about their piece is done, and they're not thinking about like, and my piece also has to get tested and published somewhere, and users have to review it, and then bugs have to get fixed. So you need to be thinking through all those things that your individual contributors might not be thinking about what done actually means. And so one of the things I always tell my teams is your piece done, or is the whole thing done and I can ship it? Those are different things. Another element of a perfect schedule is that it's flexible. New information is going to come along the whole time, and you need to not be stressed out that your plan is going to change. Your plan needs to, it's designed to change. So you're just building a framework that sort of tells everybody like, this is the direction that we're all going together, but definitely it's gonna change as you go along. And then the last thing is that you're designing this to be used as a plan to manage the work. So once you sort of do all this thinking work up front, then you sort of have a structure like, okay, I know what we need to work on now. I know what we need to work on next. I know if this person finishes their tasks early that I have some things in the queue for them to work on and which things are the priority. So you don't have to keep making those decisions as resources become available. So you've sort of done all the thinking ahead of time, and then all you're doing is thinking about how you're handling, you know, deviations from your plan rather than thinking about what is my plan. So, and then I think we're going to have another session where we talk specifically about sprints and methodologies and how we use a plan to manage the work. So that's a teaser for an upcoming session. All right. Now what you need to get started. We had a little preview session with the cohort, but for those of you that weren't able to join us for that session, we talked through just some basic definitions. Who your stakeholders are. That's anybody who cares about your project. That could be your investors, can be you, can be your parents, can be your customers, can be your users, can be your competitors even. Just think about both internally inside your organization as well as externally, like who's invested in how this product or project turns out, and then that will inform how you prioritize what you put into it, what your big chunks of activities are. You may think about the scope of your project. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about scope. Scope is really important to think through. Like even if you didn't build a project plan, like please take the time to think about scope. Whenever you're working with a team, you need to clearly define for them, like what are we doing and what are we not doing? Because they might be like that guy that Stephen told us a story about who would stay up till 2 a.m. and do extra stuff, but he might spend all his energy working on something that is a distraction or is something that you don't need. And if you're very clear about what's in and what's out, then that helps people like that to do extra. And also helps people who spin their wheels a little bit or who like they overthink things. Those kind of people are great because they're really creative and they're really detail oriented, or they're just really passionate about your project. But you don't want them to be spending all their energy overthinking. You want them to spend their energy working, right? And so if they have a clear picture of what the scope of the project is, then you can sort of avoid some of the things that can distract and take time away from doing the work and can take time away from team meetings. Then if your scope is big, break it into pieces. My brother likes to say that that's a tip that we learned from my dad, that he always said, like, whatever it is, you can break it into smaller pieces and just keep breaking it down until you find a piece that's small enough that you could work on it. And I think that's really useful, especially if you're a solo founder or if you're very early stages in your project, because you want to sort of break down your project into pieces that are small enough that you find something that you actually could do. So even if you didn't have the skills to do all of the tasks in your project, like if you break it down into small enough pieces, you'll find stuff that's small enough that you could actually do it yourself. And that'll help you make progress, and it'll help you know which pieces you need to do versus which pieces you might need other people to do. Then I want to talk about deadlines. So deadlines, when you're the CEO, are kind of, they're up to you. So you can decide, do I want to just figure out what all the pieces are I want to build and how long each piece is going to take? That's called a bottoms-up estimate, where you figure out what your target date is based on adding up how much each one of the efforts is going to take. Or do you want to pick, like, there's an important trade show coming up, or there's a client that I really want to do a demonstration for, and they're making a buying decision on a certain date. Like, so you think about whether you're working to a deadline where you're going to figure out how much time you have and what could fit in that time, versus your deadline is kind of open-ended and you're just figuring out how long you think it might take to do all the work. So either one of those ways is fine, but think about which way you're doing it. working to it. Working to a specific deadline, like a trade show or something, can be really motivating for the team, but it also can be really intimidating, because what you find as you go along is that you have to keep taking features out in order to make up for problems that you encounter while you're working on other things. And the last thing you want to think about is risks. Like, once you have your plan, you want to take a hard look at it, and you want to think through what could go wrong. Because when you take the time to think through the risks to your project, it helps you start thinking about, like, how would you respond when those things happen? And then when they do happen, you have a really good sense of, like, okay, I knew that could happen, and I'm okay. Like, I have a plan. Even if it's just a really, like, one of the risks could be somebody could leave your team, and the solution to that could be, I just need to get a new person, or I have these 3 companies that I could interview, and they could supplement, with some work for me. So, so that's really important as well. And Curling and Stephen, risk is another thing that we can actually do a whole session on. There's a process for sort of charting risks and prioritizing them. So we could share that if it's useful for everybody. But that's pretty nerdy project management. All right, tools and concepts to build your plan. I use Microsoft Project. It's a tool designed for project managers. You don't have to use it. You can use Excel, you can use Google Sheets, you can use a Word document, you can use a whiteboard, you can use a piece of paper. You're really building an outline. So think back to, like, junior high school when you learn how to write outlines for documents. That's what you're doing. And you want to think about tasks, which is, like, what are the bite-sized pieces of work that people can do? Dependencies, which is which things have to happen before the other thing. And resources. Resources can be people, they can be organizations, they can be groups of people, they can be whole teams. So it doesn't have to be just an individual person. And the last thing is estimates. So you're going to want to have a sense of how big your tasks are. And you have a couple ways that you can do it. You can, when you're very early stages, rather than saying, like, this is going to take 4 hours, and this is going to take 1 day, and this is going to take a month, you might want to do something simpler, like a t-shirt size. So you could say, this is a small task, this is a medium task, this is a large task, or this is an extra large task. And that'll help you sort of not get stuck on, like, how many hours or days is a certain thing going to take. You just know, is it a really big thing, or is it a medium thing, or is it a small thing? So that will help you. That's all that I sort of had prepared for presentation. Does anybody have questions or comments?
No, I asked some people. I have a couple questions for you, but what I was trying to think offhand is I can save some of those to the end, Johanna. You guys can move to this kind of interactive piece, which I think is really helpful.
Okay.
But just reminding everybody that they can post their questions on chat.
And is it about 12:15 now? Is that where we are?
It is, yes.
Okay. So what I like to do is actually just jump into building a schedule. So let me stop sharing this screen. And I move my computer down so I can share my other screen. Here you go. Can you see Microsoft Project now?
Yes.
Okay.
And I know we're going to try to use, want to start from our cohort. I know it's Sunny. Sunny, just real quick, could you tell everyone about your startup?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm the CEO of Blacklogix. And Blacklogix is geared towards landscape architects. So currently they spend well over 50 hours a week designing and sourcing materials for a project on a small budget. So with Blacklogix, we relieve that pain with our mobile app and website. And it has real-time drag and drop features for designing the project as well as sourcing. So we're basically the tech secret to landscape design.
All right. That's a good synopsis.
Thank you.
And so I think, John, we're going to use Sunny's startup as kind of like an example for everybody.
Yeah. So we sort of built a basic framework for project schedule where we broke down what elements of a project we might need, like a website, a web application, an iOS application, an Android application. And we were just digging into what we would need for actually building a web application. We talked about development environments, test environments, and production environments. And we talked about different elements specific to development. We were just sort of digging into how, I think we were talking about how some business decisions will affect some of the design decisions. And so Sunny, we sort of left off where I was asking you questions about how we were going to post bids. And then you asked me, you're on mute, by the way. There you go. And you asked me like, how could I, I would want a percentage if I sent them some referral business. So really what you need here before you can decide whether you want to build your bid model is there's another activity that needs to happen first, which is you need to make a decision. How will bidding work? So you kind of have some homework. This is a bite-sized task that you can do. So then we know that this is Sunny's task. And I might give you 2 weeks to think about it, right? And then we can't work on the bidding module until after Sunny makes a decision about how it's going to work. And then you might have to say, I might say like, once I have multiple tasks that are related to each other, I like to group them and then do a little indent so I know they're related to each other. And that way I'm not looking at a giant list. It gives my eyes a place to focus. So I might say bidding and posting bids is like something I want to figure out. And those two things are tasks that are part of figuring that out. And later you might have more tasks that are related to that. So we talked about you want to have subscriptions, you want to have logins, you want to have account creation. We need to, once you let people create accounts, you need to let them modify accounts. That means we're going to need security and permissions. You want to have the ability to do project design, and you have this material sourcing. So let's go back to talking about the project design. Does that sound okay?
That's fine.
So what kind of stuff, think about, I'm doing a project design and I don't have your application. How does it work?
If they did not have my application?
Old school, no technology. How does?
Oh, okay. Then you have to do it manually. Get a piece of paper or whatever type of paper that you use and just basically draw it out. You would need pencil, ruler, the compass, you would need the color pencil so that way you can indicate what color certain things are going to be.
So they have to create a drawing, and they might need colors.
Yeah.
And do they?
You would have to have. I wouldn't say like perfect drawing skills, but you would have to know how to, basically make a tree or a bush or something like that. Okay,
and then you need to maybe be able to make notations on the drawing. Like, correct. This is item number 1.
Correct. You have like a, what is it? Index, a color, an index that would basically say what is what.
Is the index a standard thing that you could just give people, or is it unique to each drawing?
You would have to do it would be for each individual item.
So in my other life, I manage an R&D team, and we build hardware, and so we create CAD drawings, and we create assemblies and sub-assemblies, and we have notations on the drawings. So I'm assuming it's something similar to that, where I need 4 bushes and 8 trees, and you have to be exactly this type. It needs to be this size, right? And then it's all gonna and you might have I'm guessing in the landscape architecture design that there might be elements that are not nature elements. They're like stone paths and.
Correct. And the thing is with that, if some people have to have that that skill, the AutoCAD skill. They have to have that training. If they don't know it, then it's left up to someone else. But with our program, you don't have to have, you know, experience in AutoCAD. You just basically have to have a vision of what you want to design.
You kind of have a library of elements. So you're going to have to, so you need to create your library, design library, right?
This list just keeps growing.
Yeah, but you see how you start brainstorming, like, you know, if I really wanted to use this, like, imagine you're using it. Like,
right.
What's the first thing that I need? Oh, I have to go to a site somewhere. Oh, I have to log in. Okay, now I'm in my account. What do I want to do next? Because and a good place to start with figuring some of those things out is to look at who your competition is, or look at a product that's similar to what you want to do, but in a different industry, and just see go to every screen that you can go to, make lists, right? And think about, like, how does that actually work? And then it'll let you start breaking down the pieces of the functionality that you want to build. Now, Stephen and Curling are both engineers, and they can tell you that, like, this is not enough information for an engineer. This is just enough information for you to build the framework of what it is that you want to build so that you can communicate to the engineers. When you talk to the engineers, they're going to have 10,000 questions for you about how does that work, and which thing do you do first, and what screen do you want to see first, and where is it going to be on the screen, and how big does it need to be, and what color is it going to be. And so there are a lot of pieces that are the reason why you need to talk to your team once you get this basic list in place. And this list is we're not gonna get it right the first time, right? As you work on this and as you see things, even now, several years in with Fokcus, we see something and we're like, oh, that's brilliant. We need that in our thing, right? And so, and we think about, okay, which module could that be part of? And how could that work? And, like, what would we have to change in order to be able to do something like that? Or is it just a surface thing? And so, so know that this plan is going to change all, and something might get invented while you're going along. You'd be like, oh, I don't need that whole module anymore because everybody just uses this other solution, and what I need to do is plug into that solution. Okay, so we talked about project design module a little bit, and I know that there's more stuff that's going to be needed, but let's go on to your other module, which is your material sourcing. So let's talk about that a bit. So I'm guessing this is sort of supply chain type activities.
Correct.
So this is like there's companies that you buy stuff from. You might have a discount rate. You might need to negotiate with the different organizations. You might want to get fees from them as well, referral fees, because you're sending business to them. So you might want to think through the same kind of questions that you're thinking through when you're thinking about the bidding companies, like what type of relationship do I want to have with these, with my material sources. And then you want to think about, you know, what a cool website that you should look at. Curling, we should have her look at Curement.
Oh yeah, correct. Yes, that's actually a really good one. It's kind of like a marketplace, and it could give her some insights.
And it's sort of the same scale of user, like a small independent office or a person who works on their own. So Curement is designed for dentist offices, but it allows them to do their supply ordering and things like that. So you might want to look at how they've designed their system. They're a little further along than you, and think about how you could use some of what they've learned from interacting with your users to inform your own design. And that, I would say, like, that's always a really solid thing to do, is if you can find something that's not in your industry but can do the same types of stuff that you want your system to do, that's a good way to sort of think up what your starting point is.
Okay.
Yeah, and Brianna, we can, Sunny, we can connect you with Brandon.
Yeah.
He's the CEO. Yeah, you could talk to him.
Okay.
So now we got another tech school speaker. Okay, so so we want to, so you need to again, you need a decision about how will purchasing work? Are you thinking they'll be able to buy things directly through your platform? Like they have their design and they get this shopping list that comes out of their design?
Well, basically, it would be basically whichever item that they drag into that design. That will be the source, and of course it'll have all the information. It's up to the customer's leisure to check out that website.
Okay.
Or check out that vendor or supplier, I should say.
So you're not thinking that you'll automate it. So one of the things that I do while we're in quarantine is I've been cooking and baking a lot. And I found all these websites that have recipes on them. And once I have a recipe, I can actually stack several recipes together, and I can build a menu, and then I can click something that will take all the things that I need for every recipe and build a shopping list for me. So you may want to think about that type of capability. Maybe it works or maybe it doesn't work, but think about, like, is that sort of conceptually how you want it to work? Or are you thinking you're just going to give them, like, here's 3 vendors for each one of the types of things that you need to buy, and this is our preferred supplier list, and then they just go off and they make all the phone calls and do everything themselves.
Okay.
So, and the answer might be, the initial version is you're going to give them a preferred list of suppliers. You can give them 3 suppliers for each thing that they might want to acquire, and then they have to do the legwork. But then later you might be able to just automate the whole thing. Like they might be able to save, like, these are my favorite people that I buy from all the time, and then when I do my design, it automatically sends them an order.
Okay.
So you want to think through how some of those things will work. And so in your plan, you can put question marks, like, I don't really know about this, so I need to make a decision. How will purchasing work? Or you might say automatic purchasing, question mark, shopping lists, question mark. And if you have a team, you might want to get together with your team and just brainstorm. Like, I always like a whiteboard or I see your board behind you.
Yeah,
like,
I love whiteboard. I live by it.
Right? And just have and Post-it notes, right? And just like brainstorm with your team and think about, like, how is this going to work, and put each element of it that you can identify on a Post-it note and move them around until everybody buys into a particular workflow. And one of the ways that you can do that is you can start with each type of user. So you think about, like, are your users going to be mostly landscape architects? Okay, I'm a landscape architect. What do I want to accomplish? And how do I work my way through your system? And create sort of a workflow diagram where you create everything in a box and with arrows, like, I can do this thing, and then I can do this thing, and then I can do these 3 things, and then I can do this thing, and then I go back to the beginning. And then if you have different types of users, like maybe the bidding companies want to log in and post their advertising, or maybe the source companies that provide the goods for the design have some element that they do. And then maybe there's some other type of user, which is like, I'm a consumer and I'm looking for a landscape architect, and I want to just browse other people's designs that have already been done, and I want to, I pay a subscription fee, and and I get inspiration. So think about, like, who are all the different types of people that would be interested in, now that you have a site with data, right? Who's interested in that data, right? So you want to identify who all your users are. How are we doing on time? It's 12:30.
We're doing good, Joanna. I think what we can do is, why don't you, in some ways, see if you can wrap part of this up. Maybe you can look at one more segment, and then we'll open up for. I have a couple questions I had from startups.
Perfect. So, so that's sort of one of the cool things about Microsoft Project is when you're done working on something, when you don't want to look at something or don't need to think about it anymore, you can collapse it. So we just talked about development activities. I don't want to think about development activities. I don't want them cluttering up my screen while I'm trying to think about something else. I want to talk about test environments. Once you set up your test environment, imagine now you've had a team of programmers. They built some of that stuff. You had already made your design decisions and they've built it. Now you have to do testing. So this is something you need to build into a schedule. Once they build it, it isn't done, right? Once they build a feature or a set of features, the project isn't actually done. Then you have to test it and make sure it works. Make sure it doesn't have bugs in it, because you don't want to tell your customers like, okay, go ahead, log on. And then the first thing that happens is the login doesn't work, right? And so you want to make sure you test all the features. So in your test environment, in your test activities, tasks, you should have something that matches every single thing in your development activities task. So you might actually want to have it open while you're building this, because you might want to have all these things. I'm going to copy. I'm going to put them down here. Maybe not. Okay, so here's your test. I copied your development activities. And now I'm going to say test subscription module, test the login capability, test the account creation, right? All of these things take time. Test the ability to modify an account, test security and permissions. And then after you test them, you're going to have bug fixing and retesting. So then you've got 2 tasks for each one of these tasks now. It's easy. Once you figure out one, you just copy paste it to the other ones. So now you have log defects or bugs, however you like to call them. You want to keep track of them so that you can they're like your to-do list of stuff that you need to fix, and you want to fix the defects, and then you want to retest the defects. And if this was my project plan, I actually would have subtasks here. Testing. So where you have testing, logging defects, fixing defects, and retesting. And then you would have this for each one of the things. So you can copy these lines down. And I won't do that for all of them, but you start to think through like how, so while the development team is working on building stuff, you're building the plan for how they're going to test it, right? So you're always working like a little bit ahead of what your team is doing. And then while testing is happening, then you should be focusing on your production environment. Now, you will want to work with an architect or with your development team if they're knowledgeable, or get some outside help with this, because before we start development, you do need to make some decisions about your architecture. But then actually, and setting up your test environment and making decisions about how you're going to move things into your test and production environments. But did I close the wrong thing? Where's oh, here's my production environment. So you'll have your production environment set up, but once the application's built, you actually have to make it accessible to people, and that involves moving files and making things live and setting up stuff with your domain company wherever you have your website registered. And currently, we've been talking about this. We just had a chat with Sam about this recently. About how you deploy to production. So this is a thing that you need to plan. It's going to take time after your site is done. It might take a day or two to actually make it available for people to use it after it's been tested. So that's sort of just a high level framework of sort of application development, planning activities, and how I think through the process. Each one of these things, once you have your list, you'll want to sit down with your developers and say, how long do you think you need to do that? And if the answer is I don't know, that means you have to break it into smaller pieces. So anytime you get I don't know from your team, you just say like, okay, well, what's the first thing that you need to be able to do in order to answer the question? They say, oh, I might need to research something. I need 3 days to research options and pick the best one, and I need 2 days to test it. And then once we have that decision made, then we can figure out what the next steps are. Just keep trying to, whenever you get, I don't know, don't just let people go off and work on it sort of in a vacuum with no framework. Like you want to know what your team is working on, because you want to be able to support them, to bring in extra resources, to find mentors for them. You want to make sure that you understand at least conceptually what they're working on, even if you don't understand the actual task. Okay, Carling, that's kind of.
Yeah, that was great. Yeah, that was good. Thanks for giving the whole high level overview, and I'm glad we did like the pre planning ahead. That was great. I have a few questions from other startups, but you know what? Let me. I know I talked to Stephen. Stephen, you have any initial questions for Johanna?
Yeah, I do. I got a question for Johanna.
Yeah.
So it relates back to some of your slides that you talked about, and maybe some of the things you kind of mentioned beyond that. So for all those like software engineers out there like myself, we know that, you know, in doing projects, it's very important to have some definition of success, right? In project management, I think this kind of goes in line with that, having
Yes.
some sort of like definition of done. From a project management standpoint, is it better to have a kind of like a top-down approach where you start with that predefined definition of done or of success in whatever project we're doing, and then kind of reverse engineer that to, you know, kind of break it down into the steps and tasks needed to accomplish that? Or is it better to do the reverse and start with a vision that you have from the beginning, and then building up to that and saying, okay, this is what I think, you know, at some point, this is what I think we can accomplish in this time frame, right? What is there a better way to approach, you know, one or the other, or what are your thoughts?
So it depends on what your project is and who your team is. But I almost always use a hybrid approach. I've been doing it for a lot of years. What I find is that if I want to do a bottoms up estimate with my team, that they're overwhelmed on figuring out where to start. And so if I show up with a framework like what we just built, and I come to the team saying, these are the buckets of things that I know that we need to do, like, can you help me figure out how long each one's going to take? And especially if I show up and I say, like, I know we did this before and it took about this long. Does that sound reasonable? But like sometimes the deliverables are things like write a document, and there are things that you can break apart really easily. Like, I need 5 days to draft it, and 2 days to send it around for review, and 5 days to get everybody to sign it. So like there's some things that you can just use your intuition to sort of figure out how long each thing's going to take. But I think bottoms up is really hard because you don't have the buckets and the structure in place if you just start with bottoms up. I mean, I guess if you wanted to spend a whole day with your team and you all don't know anything about anything, and you just brainstorm, and then while you're brainstorming, I would brainstorm with sticky notes, and you can start to say like, okay, these things all seem like they're kind of related together. I guess we have a login module now, and it's going to have all these features in it. You could do it that way. And in the end, it's whatever works for you or your team. If you feel like it's overwhelming to try to break down the pieces by yourself, you just start staring at the screen. Like, get your team together and just say, we're going to carve out some time and we're going to figure out what our plan is. I need to understand what we're going to build. Because I always learn things when I talk to the development team, things that I think are quick or easy. They tell me like, no way, that requires 8 things and each one's going to take me at least a month. And I'm like, oh, okay. Maybe we can't do all that right now and just pick one piece. Is that enough of an answer?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
John, you know, we always get startups that do come to us with a few different things, and one of them they always are saying, and this is kind of, I'll put in a question like, how long should you work on a plan? You know, I need to maybe having a whole brainstorming session, maybe a weekend or something, versus you just doing it, right? Working on MVP. when
Um,
people come to you and say that? What's
I
your
think
answer?
I think if you're doing the work yourself and you have a clear picture of what you're doing, you probably can proceed with no plan. But the minute you need to be able to communicate status or target dates or milestones, like you'd have to be really disciplined to kind of to work to any kind of structure. But there are a lot of people that they're okay with just plugging away on it and tinkering with it and iterating, and it gets done when it gets done. And I don't think that's wrong, but the minute you're working with a bigger team, and especially if you have a less experienced team, having a plan, it's worth taking. I wouldn't spend more than 2 days on it, and realistically, you can probably do it in a half a day because there's so many unknowns when you're very early in a startup. If you spend a half a day on it, like that would be a lot. How long did we spend? 15 minutes?
Yeah.
And you have a framework now, right? Now you know, like, where do I still have questions and where do I have clear direction? Where I have clear directions, that's what I should have the team work on first.
That's great. And I have one more other one. I had four, but I think this might make more sense too. You know what? You're giving us all this great advice on how to create a plan, but what other types of outside help you think someone would need if they were creating like an app, like creating an app?
I mean, you're going to need some sort of experience with programming, or you're going to have to be fearless, right? I definitely have done startups where I didn't know anything, and I went to the bookstore and I bought myself databases for dummies, and and I sat down and I mapped out a plan for myself, and I just said, okay, what do I have to do first? What do I have to do next? And and you can cobble things together that way. And I think just sort of managing yourself with to-do lists works just fine if you're working like that. But if you're working with application developer that's that you've hired to do this work for you, or if you have college interns that are trying to get some real world work experience, that I think they do better if you at least have a list of things. I guess one of the things I'll tell you is that the plan is really for you. The plan is for the person who's in charge of stuff, who's driving the thing to completion. I almost never show my plan to my team. They give input to it, and I ask them lots of questions, and they know that I update it, and I have sort of a shortcut view that I show them where I put it on a timeline, and I just show them. They know, like, but what I use it for is to say, like, for you, this is your list of things that you need to do, and you told me that you could probably get it done by this date. Does that sound okay with you? I think that's what I use the plan for. And we can talk a bit more about in the other session. I don't ever make anybody sit down and look at the plan with me or read the plan. I don't touch the plan a lot, other than to add things and take them away or rearrange them. But I update it once a month or something like that. I don't touch it every day.
No, that's great. That's great insight.
But plans are scary. They're boring. They're really detailed. It's an eye chart, right? You looked at Microsoft Project. You were looking at that screen. It doesn't look interesting, right? Like, it's useful, but it's hard to make sense if you're not the one that made it. Like, there's so much complexity in your thinking of your dependencies and the way that you named things and how you group things together that it's hard to think about somebody else sort of making sense of that and maintaining it.
No, that's good. That's good. That's good insight, Johanna. I want to just first of all thank you for doing this kind of series on project management and stuff like that. I know there's going to be some more that you're going to work on, or kind of there's a couple more tech school sessions. So just thank you on that. I know we had some other people like Nate on from Technical Launch. I said, cool. give a little shout out on that too. But I'm going to have at this point, Stephen, do like kind of final thoughts, and we can wrap it up.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you guys. Thanks everyone for coming on. For everyone who's able to tune in, thanks for coming on. I know Johanna, you shared some awesome insight today. Thanks for the presentation and walking us through an example and then answering questions. Nate and Sunny and Brianna, thanks for tuning in too. And everyone else that was able to tune in via YouTube and everything like that. So thank you. Just a quick reminder, just to kind of echo what was said at the beginning. If you guys get a chance, if you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, all that fun stuff. All the interactions we get with videos like this, they help push, increase our reach for our videos and our content. So that like or that comment that you leave might just push this video out to somebody who really wanted to know or really needed to know maybe a tidbit about project management to help their startup, right? So it's a quick and easy way for you as a member of the startup or entrepreneur community to be able to help support others just by something simple. So I did want to mention that. But thank you guys, and take care. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Tech School.